Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed for part 2 of the July Q&A. In part 1 I said there wouldn't be a part 3, but we've just reviewed all the questions we have and there are quite a few good ones, so we might do a part 3. Anyway, not relevant for right now. All you have to do is sit back and relax as we answer your questions in part 2.
Today's video is brought to you by Odoo, an intuitive and fully interconnected business solution designed to boost productivity for companies of all sizes. Running a business generally means using a, frankly, ridiculous number of apps, one for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and so on. But Odoo's approach is to put all of that into one platform. They offer over 40 integrated business apps covering all of these things and loads more, making it the perfect business solution for a wide range of sectors. As everything is part of the same platform, your data actually talks to each other, which is generally preferable to maintaining 6 spreadsheets and hoping nothing breaks. And we know a lot about the difficulties of maintaining spreadsheets. Odoo is also highly customizable while maintaining a sleek and modern approach compared to typical apps. Whether you're running a small business or managing a much larger operation, you can build a setup around the tools you actually need. Get started with one app completely free and enjoy the reduced number of subscriptions and spreadsheets. Check out Odoo below using the links in the description.
Ryzen 5000 series CPUs will be 6 years old by the end of this year. Technically, though, one of them was just re-released this year, so it's 0 years old. I'm not sure if that
does it count? Yeah, I'm not sure.
Anyway, Intel 12th gen will turn 5, and the RTX 30 series will turn 6, which is crazy. How soon will we see these families of parts become the minimum spec for PC gaming? Well, the RX 6600 is already in the minimum bracket for some games because it's the lowest non-trash AMD ray tracing GPU. Calling the RX 6600 non-trash for ray tracing, it's pretty kind, I feel, but I see where you're at.
Maybe it's the ray tracing GPU, because that's true, it has ray tracing support, but it's not the trash 6500 XT or something. Not sure. Yeah, minimum spec. If you asked us this question, I think a few years ago, I'd probably have a different opinion to now, because everything's up in the air these days with the price of things. And I think we're probably would be expecting better longevity from parts now. Maybe game developers not necessarily targeting the latest and greatest graphics for all games and needing to play it that way. So that's going to make the minimum spec discussion pretty interesting. I mean, anything, so, this question sort of points out the 6600 is, getting a bit old these days. But anything that's sort of below the level of the current generation consoles, you'd probably say once we start getting the next generation of consoles, will start becoming pretty useless pretty quickly. We're not really in a world where game developers are making games for the PS4 anymore as it is right now. But that's only going to get worse once you start to see cross-generation games for the next generation platforms. But even then, there's a lot of GPUs released over the past couple of years that have been at that level or better. And so that's going to hopefully drive a lot of longevity, and especially because Sony, for example, is pulling back on porting their games to PC. You're probably not going to see too many of the new PS6 titles coming to PC anytime soon, or even ever. So
it's a difficult question to answer as well, because there is such a broad range of performance within those product categories. For example, like an RTX 3090 Ti is still a really powerful GPU, very usable, miles off being the minimum spec. But then, the RTX 3070, 8 gigs of VRAM, getting pretty long in the tooth, still not too bad. The 3060, which they are bringing back, pretty slow now, does struggle a bit, but certainly still usable. Again, it does depend on the games and the quality settings and all that sort of stuff. But, if you're talking about the latest games, minimum quality settings, sort of 1080p resolution, a lot of that stuff is open to interpretation, but the same thing applies for the Ryzen 5000 series, because the 5800X 3D, which has just been re-released, still quite a capable, or very capable CPU. So you're looking at like Zen 4, 7600, 7700, or even the 9600X from the Zen 5 range levels of performance, and it rivals, some of the more recently released Intel parts as well. So, but then there are lower end, even APUs like the Ryzen 5 5500. That's the equivalent to like a Ryzen 5 3600, which is going back quite a ways now. But even that, is still very usable in a lot of games. Whereas I heard back then 6-core CPUs would be dead and there was no point spending $200 on a 6-core CPU because it wouldn't be blah, blah. And they still work just fine. So Yeah, it does depend on the actual product within those product series, and
it even depends on your definition of like minimum spec.
Exactly.
Like, what do you mean by minimum spec? Do you mean running at 1080p 30 FPS with low settings, or do you mean more of a realistic configuration for someone that had bought some of these parts? Because if you'd bought a 3070, as you said, I don't think you'd be buying it for playing games at 1080p 30 FPS. You probably bought it for 1440p 60 plus FPS with decent quality settings.
Well, it's such a subjective thing as well, because I'm not playing any game at 1080p at 30 FPS, and say what you will about that, but that's prior to being a YouTuber when I was in my teens and stuff like that. Like, I had a target that I was willing to work towards, and there's a long list of things I would rather do in my life than play modern PC games at 1080p at 30 FPS. That's just, I don't know why I feel the need to apologize for that. That's just the situation, right? So, I want at least 60 FPS, and my minimum spec basically is what I'm getting at. Possibly looks different to other people's minimum spec, though. I think saying you'd want a game no lower than 1080p at 60 FPS is not some sort of out of touch minimum spec. I would think.
No.
I would think.
I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I think what we may see across the next couple of years is more of a gulf between what a game offers on the minimum spec versus what it offers on sort of the highest ultra tier sort of settings. Because there was a period of time there where there wasn't a lot of difference between the low settings and ultra settings. I'm thinking of, even if you go to like Cyberpunk 2077 and you sort of go between...
That looked great on Medium, for example.
Prior to when they sort of added path tracing and stuff into the game, the highest quality settings and the lowest quality, not a huge difference. Alan Wake 2, there's also not... it's a great looking game. It is maybe more performance intensive than some of the games that you'd consider for like a minimum spec PC, but it's not a huge difference. But I think what we're going to see more of is sort of the ultra settings experience may start to pull away more, and really the minimum spec that they're still offering via low settings is going to be the stripped back textures to fit with inside 8 gigabytes of VRAM, fairly low quality lighting effects.
It's like Fortnite on performance mode.
Yeah, I mean, like in Forza Horizon, for example, you can really cut back on the geometry detail and texture detail. You can turn off things like shadows, which is still quite rare for modern games. A lot of them won't let you do that, but you can in that game. Makes it look very bad, in my opinion. And then if you sort of compare that low spec experience to the premium ultra everything enabled, it very much looks like a different game, in my opinion. So I think we'll see more of that as game developers sort of try and keep their games running on the largest target market. But what I think is going to be really interesting as well is the current CPUs that are used in the consoles that developers are targeting games for is pretty slow by modern PC standards. 5800 XUD is much, much faster than the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X's CPU. And so once we get a new generation with faster CPUs and game developers start having something to target that's better than a slow, like Zen 2 limited frequency sort of thing that they've got going on, that could open up a lot more. Again, I still expect there to be a big difference between sort of the low settings PS5 target compared to maybe the PS6 target, but you may start seeing CPUs being utilized for some things that previously they weren't able to utilize them for. So maybe that's more object density, NPC density, CPU intensive sort of things. There may actually be a point to having those parts that isn't just super high frame rate gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that EXPO ULL kits could ever be worth the extra cost compared to normal EXPO kits and an upgrade to a faster XOD CPU? So I'm guessing they're saying if you're buying a CPU and memory kit, you could either get EXPO without ULL and a better CPU, or just the EXPO ULL.
Yeah, if there's a huge price premium for the ULL stuff, then that's absolutely the case. I don't know how old this question is, because the pricing has changed quite a bit, and it almost feels a bit silly talking about pricing of memory right now, given how stupid things are and have been for a while and continue to get. So I don't want to make any sort of firm, statements on memory pricing or whatnot. But we have seen that there's, I think in one of the examples I gave in my video covering this, it was like a $30 premium at like $500 versus $530. So the low latency stuff wasn't costing you that much more money. And they have said that they're meant to be pretty much the same or very similar in terms of price. But, we have seen some huge price discrepancies, but again, it's
new stock versus old stock and all of those.
It's a complete mess at the moment. So I wouldn't, as I said in my video, I don't really recommend buying DDR5 memory at all right now if you can, avoid doing so. And if you have to buy memory, buy the absolute cheapest option you can get away with, because it's not going to be worth trying to get like low latency memory in the current market. So you'll just have to wait and see how that pans out. Hopefully DDR5 pricing won't be absolutely horrific in the future. I don't know.
Don't make any firm commitments.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea, because I'm as I've said 1,000 times on the channel, I'm baffled as to how this thing has continued as long as it has. But more and more cracks, as far as I can tell, continue to keep appearing, but it does seem to be full steam ahead despite the cracks. So I don't know what to make of it, guys. But yeah, probably don't buy DDR5 memory is really the only firm advice I can give you if you can help it. And if you can't, get the cheapest, whatever it is you can get. All right, Tim, how do you avoid LG's adware/spyware sneaky installation? My advice would be buy a Samsung.
Actually, probably don't buy a Samsung based on my recommendations. Usually they're not the best choice. Yeah, this has been a really weird situation, because I'm not sure when this question was asked or whether the person that asked this question had seen the latest updates relating to this. Mm-hmm. It sounds like Microsoft have taken some steps to reduce the level of annoyance in terms of LG software. I'm not sure whether they have prevented LG from installing the software, which, the spyware angle and the pop-up angle, I guess, are two different issues. So I'm assuming you've seen the Gamers Nexus video where, you buy an LG monitor, you plug it in, it automatically through Windows Update installs LG software, which has some spying implications, annoying pop-ups, bloatware, all sorts of things. It seems that Microsoft has forced LG to prevent the pop-up situation, the adware, bloatware type thing from happening. I'm not sure whether that means they've stopped the installer or whether they've just limited what the installer does. But certainly they've pulled that back, which is great to see Microsoft stepping in, because, as I said in our podcast last week, I strongly blame Microsoft for a lot of this. They should not be just allowing LG to do whatever they want with what's supposed to be a driver delivery mechanism, not bloatware delivery mechanism for products that are plugged into your PC. It's supposed to be a helpful tool to help you access the software that you need for the things you're plugging in without you needing to find it on their websites, but abusing it through these sort of bloatware things is not great to see. So Microsoft did step in to stop parts of that from happening. I think they will still install this software for you, though. We do see that with other monitor brands as well, Asus, Dell. They do it in a slightly different way. They sort of have this pop-up where you can choose to install it or not. I just recently got this testing out the latest Dell 39-inch monitor with the Dell Alienware Command Center. It gives you a pop-up that says, do you want to install this software or not? You can click cancel, it just basically goes away. If you click install, it will install the software. Same with Asus. So obviously LG is the outlier that it sort of installs it for you. Now, how do you get rid of this software? I would just go to the Gamers Nexus video and follow their guides, because it is a little insidious in the way that it works. It's not easy to just uninstall the software and have it removed from your system. If you replug that monitor in or that device in, it could trigger the re-download of the software again. And sometimes you see with driver updates for your GPU, for example, it might reinitialize all your displays. And that could mean your PC thinks that you've plugged in your monitor again. You might get that bloatware installed again. So you do need to do, I believe it's some registry changes or modifications to prevent the aspect of Windows Update that gets in third-party drivers from being installed, which is not like, I'm not saying go hack and go into your registry and modify stuff, because that's not a good experience. But if you do really want to get rid of this installer, that is a way to do it. You can as well, if it is installed, go through into something like your startup applications and prevent it from starting up, disabling all of the related services as well in the service menu. That will generally stop it from being able to do anything, even though it may remain installed on your system. So that's another good way of managing it. But I think without the bloatware side of annoying pop-ups and things, on my PC, for example, it's installed but deactivated. I don't know whether that is also happening for you guys as well, but it seems one possible thing is it's not initializing all of this annoying stuff happening, just installing it and then not doing anything. But of course, I'd rather it doesn't do that either. So yeah, it's not great. The whole situation sucks, as we sort of talked about in our podcast. Some changes need to be made there. And it's unfortunate that if there is stuff being deployed in your system through Windows Update, if you uninstall it, that's not taken as a sign to never install it again because of the whole automation side of things. It can come back. So yeah, seems like though Microsoft are listening to it, so maybe they'll, deploy some changes to make it not happen again in the future. We can only hope there, because yeah, Microsoft does some weird stuff. So we've got two sort of related questions here that I both think are interesting and worth having a bit of a discussion on. So I'll just read them out. Will the component price crisis have game studios reduce the throttle on increasing graphical fidelity for near future games? And the second question is, now when there are more and more experts and definitely not a single entity memory manufacturers pretending the memory shortage and possible PC hardware stagnation to continue for years, do you think game developers will care for optimization more? Basically revisiting an already answered question, but now when predictions for the memory shortage are worse. So I guess maybe we'll tackle the game fidelity side of things first, because we had an interesting discussion on the podcast about this recently, about how a lot of you guys are sort of telling us that you don't necessarily care about game graphics or like the latest and greatest lighting features or whatever in games that you're playing. So even without like component shortages, there already seems to be this mentality from some gamers, playing the latest games, that they just want the games to run well and be fun, have good stories or good gameplay, as opposed to needing this sort of high fidelity experience.
I think ideally gamers would like all of those things, but with the stories not as compelling or intriguing or interesting, however you want to put it, as they once were, the gaming experience just not being as good as it was or what they hope to see, that's where they would like a lot of the focus to shift, rather than trying to give you more glorious graphics that people need 5090s to take advantage of. So less sort of path tracing and more like fun gameplay, I think is where people were coming at with that. But I think for that question anyway, all of that aside, there's absolutely going to have to be a shift, because I've been talking about this for years now, and I know people are going to laugh bringing this back to VRAM Unboxed, but with the vast majority of people still limited to 8 gigabytes of VRAM, they can't do more than what they're trying to make the worlds more detailed and greater view distances for these amazing vistas and these huge open worlds. You can't do that with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. You struggle to do it with 16 gigabytes. So that alone has caused this stagnation where it doesn't really matter how much faster the GPUs become. The memory pool to do things hasn't gotten bigger. We've had the same thing for like over a decade now. I think we're going on 12 years since it was introduced. Something absurd. I recently explained this on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. But that's just one problem. But then, compounding that, we do have the compute stagnation where, GPUs aren't getting that much faster that often, which I explored in a video recently. And we're seeing that slowdown of, new process nodes taking longer, being more expensive. Therefore, by the time they do come around, you're getting less for your money. And so gamers are less incentivized to upgrade. And all of that will be hurting game development as well, because, they were developing games not that long ago, but that by the time the game came out, the hardware was so much faster than they could have imagined. And now it's a complete reversal of that. The hardware stagnated so much that they couldn't have possibly imagined.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned in an earlier question, I'm not sure whether it was in this part or the previous part, I think we'll start to see a lot more separation between the highest and lowest settings in games, whether or not that's an optimization thing, because there's optimization as in let's make the 8 gigabyte low spec experience good, and there's let's make it work. And I think what you'll see is a lot more of the let's make it work category, where the games are really nerfed in ways where, yes, you can run the game, but the visual experience will be significantly downgraded, and not in a way where you're like, the performance is giving us sort of the, we've really cut down the visuals and therefore the performance is now much better. I'm thinking more they're cutting out stuff to just make it run. So the performance is still going to suck. It's going to be you're not going to get a good experience in 8 gigabyte GPU, but it will work, and they will be able to then advertise the minimum spec for the game or whatever supports 8 gigabyte GPUs. It would be nice for developers to optimize titles and really think about the experience that the lower spec gamer will have. But throughout the history of PC gaming, they haven't really done this. And, I don't even want to like sit here and blame developers like they're doing a lazy job or whatever, because it's simply a budgetary constraint for games.
Yeah.
And if you've seen anything with the trend of game development budgets getting larger and larger to just make the basic part of the game, they're not going to be particularly enthused about spending some of that money on optimization, or even necessarily maybe the graphics side of things.
But it is, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but a situation where gamers are expecting the next iteration of a game to be bigger and better than the one they played. And you constantly see games that have like world maps. They compare the size of the world.
Yeah.
This world's bigger, therefore better, but might be a Starfield type situation. But gamers are wanting to play the game they played previously, but on a bigger, more open world with more things in the world, more to explore, more to do, just a bigger, better experience. I'm sounding like a president. But you know what I mean, right? And that's fair enough, but you need the hardware to be able to do that. So if people are not able to afford enough RAM in their system, they're limited to 8GB cards, you can't make these bigger, more densely packed worlds if the hardware, especially the mainstream, isn't coming along to facilitate those sort of projects. So I feel for the game developers a little bit in that sense. I'm not defending them entirely, but when you have this vision of creating this huge open world with all of this stuff, and then you have to go back and optimize all of your glorious textures to work on an 8GB card where they're not as glorious, and you have to remove elements from the world when you use those settings. And again, I bring up the Forza Horizon 6 example where a lot of the artwork and stuff they did to get that to work on an 8GB card just gets deleted. It's gone.
I think a lot of the reason why game developers put in, these high quality visuals is it's really a marketing tool for the game. And obviously there is some artistic things going on there. Game developers, some of them want to be at the cutting edge of visuals and to do certain things to make it look a certain way to fulfill their vision. But clearly visuals is a thing that sells games. If you look at like all of the comments on like the most beautiful AAA titles, you'll see that there's a lot of discussion about, wow, this next generation title, it looks so beautiful. I can't wait to get in and enjoy that graphical experience. So I know obviously people are wanting to focus on the gameplay elements, the story elements, as we've talked about. And there is some graphic stagnation where if you compare games from now compared to previous games, maybe it hasn't improved as much as it used to, but people are still wowed by these things. But I think so there is this, I guess, incentive from a marketing standpoint to make these high quality visuals to sell titles. I just think that will be increasingly restricted to a certain class of gamer. And a lot of the effort that developers will be putting in to make it look that way won't necessarily be so that you can actually enjoy it. It will be for the marketing. It'll be, to optimize it for whatever consoles are available at the time, which as always set the sort of minimum expectations. And if your hardware level is sort of below that target, the sort of, we sort of talk about minimum spec gamers as if like game developers are going out there, they're going, hey, let's make this work on all these systems in the most beautiful way. I think more of what we'll see is let's make it work in the way we can market it, make it look the best on this group of hardware so that at least some people can enjoy it. Maybe that's like a PS5 Pro or PlayStation 6 when it comes out. And then for everyone else, this will be this sort of compatibility mode. We still want to sell you the game, and we want to make sure we're not missing out on the sales from people that have 8GB GPUs. But that experience that you saw in the trailer, it's not going to be the same because there's really no other option. There's like you can't go backwards, right? We can't go from these worlds that were designed for 12 or 16 gig GPUs to then start advertising games designed for 8GB GPUs where they're cutting out a lot of the world detail, cutting out the textures, because people will look at the trailers and go, that game looks worse than the previous version. And so when you're sort of saying gamers always want, the bigger maps, the better world detail, the better visuals, they want games to improve in that direction. Yeah, you can't just be marketing a game that goes backwards in those areas. So yeah, unfortunately, I think there's going to be, just this big gulf created between sort of the have-nots and the haves, I guess. And I don't know where that goes, but we're starting to see some of that today with some of those examples that we brought up, like Forza, where it does work. Unlike the old days where you had an 8 gig card and maybe it just doesn't work. It'll work, but it just may not be good.
How do you feel about frame rate caps and screen tearing? Ooh, love me some good old screen tearing. Would you recommend capping at a certain FPS if that meant a better experience via FreeSync / G-Sync? I feel like this isn't something talked about often.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Because I think we probably have different opinions on this. As someone that I play mostly single player games, and you mostly play multiplayer games. Yeah, the main reason you want to uncap performance, right, and uncap, not use VSync, is for lower latency.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a visual thing; it's a latency thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just have to accept, if your monitors have a low enough refresh rate, that you're going to get some tearing. But that's in the pursuit of this amazing latency that makes you better at games, or alternatively feels better to play or whatever. If you're more of a visual gamer and you're sort of playing games because of the story or whatever, or because of the visuals, and 120 FPS or whatever is fine, you don't want tearing. Looks bad, it's annoying, gets in the way, reduces the visual experience, and that's when things like frame rate caps can make sense.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not if you're playing a single player title and you're getting 200 FPS, it's pretty good. Like, I don't really need 300 FPS exceeding my monitor's refresh rate. And so that's when you'd consider doing things like frame rate caps. And one of the well-known tools that you can use to prevent tearing, still get the lowest latency experience, is just capping your FPS to slightly under your monitor's refresh rate. That means that you stay within the FreeSync or G-Sync window. You're not running into VSync limits, which can suddenly spike your latency quite significantly. So by constantly operating in that window, you get no tearing, but also the best latency experience. But you're someone that is fine with tearing because you play at really high frame rates.
Yeah,
right?
I play on a 240Hz monitor at about 300 FPS, and I never notice it.
So you just tuned it out. You just don't see it.
I don't even know that it happens, to be honest. So I don't see it at all. Yeah, I'll have to play and see what you think.
I'm always super sensitive to it. Like, whenever I see it, I'm like, oh, I can see those like lines and stuff.
Well, on the 60Hz monitors, it used to be absolutely horrific. I know I'll play a game later and you can see it, because we're going to jump on that computer for the live stream later. Don't notice it ever. I used to back in the day with slower refresh rate monitors, but that one, perfectly fine. Very, very, clarity is very nice on the 240Hz OLED. Very nice.
Yeah, I mean, tearing is less noticeable on higher refresh rate monitors because it syncs through faster. So they're sort of updating the tear, and you're not going to get as much chunks of tears and stuff like that on higher refresh rates. I think the theory is that once you start to see 1000 hertz monitors, you actually don't really need things like VSync or variable refresh rates, because the refresh window is so small that tearing it isn't really a thing anymore. Like, it's just it updates so fast that visually you find it very difficult to see. I do actually have a 1000 hertz monitor, so I should maybe check that out for myself. But
I'm getting slower and my monitor's getting faster. So my overall perceived experience is getting better.
Yeah. So yeah, if you are lucky enough to have a higher refresh rate monitor, it's maybe not something you have to consider as much. But then again, like, the higher refresh rate your monitor is, the better latency you will get without tearing as well. And so it kind of benefits you in both ways. But yeah, I find it annoying. I try and cap my monitor's refresh rate, or cap my frame rate in games to prevent it and that sort of thing. But the games I'm sort of playing, I'm playing usually above 120 FPS. It's fine enough. I'm happy with it. Don't want to see the tearing. I turn on those features. So
in the games you're playing, you spend more time reading a text prompt.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. Or seeing cutscenes. Don't want tearing in my cutscenes.
So
thank you. And that does it for part 2 of our July 2026 Q&A series. Thanks everyone for listening to the end of this one and watching it and seeing all that good stuff. Now's a good time, if you haven't watched part 1, to go back and check out that part. Some other interesting questions there. Part 3 will be up on the channel soon as well, with some more questions from you guys over on YouTube. And yeah, what else? We got Patreon if you want to sign up and gain access to all our usual cool benefits, like our exclusive Discord chat,
coolest
monthly live streams, BTS content, and some other good stuff. So thanks for watching. I'm your host, Tim.
I'm your host, Steve. See you next time.
See you next time.
Very nice.